Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talking Back to Adolescence podcast, where we explore ideas surrounding adolescence and youth and how it is a social construct. Today, I'm going to be introducing how adolescence is a historically traceable category. We're also going to use the youth lens to examine a young adult novel called The Benefits of Being an Octopus by Bradden. But I'm also going to share a little bit of my own experience from adolescence. And throughout the whole podcast, I just encourage you guys to reflect on your own experience and how that shaped you as a person. Were there moments in your life where you felt constrained by the stereotypes of adolescence, or maybe you felt like you weren't able to access a not normal, but stereotypical experience of adolescence? Thank you guys so much for listening, and let's get started. Alright, so before we dive into it, I just want to remind everyone to check the description of this video. There is going to be a link in the description for a Google form that you must fill out. There's also a short open response at the end that asks about your experience with adolescence, so just make sure that you fill that out either as you go along and listen to this, or after if you are listening this on the go. But without further ado, let's just jump into it. So, one of my favorite philosophies is summarized by this Latin phrase, de omnibus dubitandum. Yes, de omnibus dubitandum. I'm going to repeat it again. This phrase means question everything, doubt everything. And I think a lot of the times we forget to question or doubt that ingrained into society or ingrained into our minds ideas about ourselves, the world, our experiences, and this is definitely the case for adolescence. I feel like it's such an inherent idea that we just kind of accept it. It's perpetuated by parents and teachers and everyone around us, including ourselves, because we believe it to be truth. But I encourage you to doubt it. I encourage you to question adolescence and your experience of it, because adolescence was not part of human history. The idea that adolescence is part of a distinct life stage was absolutely non-existent. There was no such a thing as teens, the youth, the young adults. The idea of adolescence is not that old. It actually emerged between the 1890s to 1920s in sight of the great change that was happening in society. There was industrialization, innovation, creation of the automobile, which was so influential, more than you think, and of course, there's the passing of the new child labor laws and immigration and the creation of buying things on credit, the rise of the middle class and the upper class, gender roles being enforced, racial inequality, and of course the emergence of new fields of scientific thought like psychology, developmental psychology, things of that sort. And because of new labor laws, more young people spend time at school rather than work. And this also was influenced by the creation of the automobile. Once students were allowed to, go on buses from their town, more people were grouped by age into buildings, schools, and that's where all these ideas about adolescence being a stage of life emerged, right? So parents waited longer than the age of 16 to send their child into marriage. Students spent a lot more time in schools with peers, the creation of team sports, and all those things heavily influenced the way young people were perceived. So Granville Stanley Hall, who is deemed the father of adolescence, was a psychologist and he was an educator, and he's credited for creating the concept of adolescence. He describes adolescence as a new developmental stage influenced by social change. He characterized adolescence as a time where the youth experiences storm and stress. Some of the key theoretical ideas that also circulated around the time were the idea of the great chain of being, which is something that states that there's a hierarchy of animals and people in society, and I'm going to butcher this word, recapitulation theory. And that indicates that there's a relationship between primates and children. So a person is not fully civilized until they reach adulthood, which states that, adolescents are not civilized, which is crazy. So Hall's theories focused on childhood development and evolution. And a lot of his approaches to his theories were influenced by his conservative and Victorian upbringing, mingled with new ideas from the 20th century. So you can kind of start to see how these ideas were rooted in racism, white dominance. And he was actually a big supporter of eugenics. And eugenics is the idea that human population can be advanced through selectively breeding people with desirable traits deemed as superior. The desired traits being of white origin. So yeah, it's kind of racist. And he promoted this idea in his writings, and of course it influenced his ideas of adolescence as well. Nancy Lesko, an awesome author who wrote Act Your Age, a book that explores the origins of adolescence and the theories surrounding it, posits that there were 3 categories that shaped the way adolescence was viewed. And I'm going to quote. So 1, worries over racial progress. 2, worries over male dominance. And 3, worries over the building of a nation with unity and power. Furthermore, she states, a useful way to talk about and strategize for racial progress, male dominance, and national strength and growth. The new experts on adolescence identified particular problems to watch for and offered active supervised activities, especially team sports, as the prescribed path toward national progress and functional elites. So of course, this kind of begins to showcase that the idea of adolescence really only applied or granted to a specific group of people. And going back and thinking about the creation of the automobile, that gave young people more independence. But think about who is able to afford a car. Of course, it's going to be the wealthy white Americans of the time, not poor, not the immigrants, not the Native Americans, and not the black population at all. So the ideas about progression were circulated by the middle class, and of course the middle class was predominantly white. So it was their views on race, on gender, on sexuality that was being constantly perpetuated into society. In Lesko's view, I quote, adolescence was strategized as the right age to get boys to imagine and desire a particular national and international order. In desiring a particular nationalism, boys would likely become willing to struggle and sacrifice for this national identity. In their desiring, boys would be shaped in particular ways. This refers to, of course, the way that boys are raised to be more aggressive, the way that they participate in sports, the way that they are part of a large majority of people in the force, police force, military, all those more dangerous occupations. So as the ideas around adolescence and theories around adolescence grew and developed, certain stereotypes were being assigned to young people. And I'm just going to list some of them. And you probably can relate, or you've heard people call you these things before. Things such as being lazy, being the future for our generation that solves all the world's problems, being hormonal, having a high sex drive, being irresponsible, being rebellious, succumbing to peer pressure. Lesko also describes these as typically teenagers appear in our culture talk as synonymous with crazed hormones, as delinquents, deficiencies, or clowns, that is being not to be taken too seriously. They are most often spoken of with familiarity, sometimes with affection, and regularly with some hostility and displeasure. These stereotypes really began to trap young people because in some cases, adolescents were put into a situation where the future, it depends on them. The national security, the innovation and progression of our race and humanity was all in the hands of young people. But then they are called irresponsible, they are called hormonal, moody, being unable to understand, being creatures, being humans that are not fully developed, being a being that is becoming rather than is existing. In another book written by Margaret Finders, she writes, adolescence is generally regarded as part of a natural life cycle that is biologically determined. The discourse of adolescence holds that 1. Adolescents sever ties with adults. 2. Peer groups become increasingly influential social networks. 3. Resistance is a sign of normalcy for the adolescent. And 4. Romance and sexual drive govern interests in relationships. According to this discourse, adolescents' meanness and conflict-driven by uncontrollable hormonal surging are interpreted as signs of normal adolescent development. The idea that adolescence is rooted in biology reinforces the stereotypes. Oh, you act this way because biologically your body is producing hormones, chemicals you can't control. Therefore, this is definitely a stage of life. This is definitely something we all go through, and this is definitely a universal experience. But I challenge you to question these stereotypes and reflect upon how your experience of adolescence broke these stereotypes. To further develop the idea that adolescence is a social construct, we can see that adolescence is not for everyone. Adolescence was created for a specific group of people, middle to upper class, predominantly white, and predominantly male audience. Adolescence is also defined by your gender, your sexuality, your social status in your class. And let's examine this further by talking about one of the books that we have read in class, and that is Benefits of Being an Octopus by Bradden. So literature, of course, can be read in all sorts of ways, and one way in which literature can be examined is through different lenses. That may be through the lenses of gender, race, class, etc., etc. So one of my professors in college, Sophia Sarajanides, developed something that's called a youth lens. And the youth lens focuses specifically on how young adults and adolescents are represented in literature, and it examines if a particular piece of literature disrupts the stereotypes of youth or encourages the stereotypes. The key questions to ask when applying the youth lens is how adolescence is represented in the text, and what role does the text play in reinforcing or subverting ideas of adolescence. And I'm giving credit to my professor because a lot of what I just said were strictly words from her own mouth. Alrighty, so the book, The Benefits of Being an Octopus, serves as a text that explores adolescence through the additional application of class. The book beautifully disrupts stereotypes and points to the idea that adolescence is not a universal experience. The main character, Zoe, lives in a trailer park with her mom's boyfriend, Lenny, his father, and her 3 little younger siblings, Hector, Bryce, and Aurora. A lot of her experience as an adolescent is influenced by her family's poverty. She is more of a mom to her siblings than her actual mom is. She takes care of them while her mom works. She does not have access to readily clean clothing or the opportunity to participate in much of her education. Throughout the book, we see countless examples where Zoe breaks the common views of adolescence. Adolescents are viewed as irresponsible and rebellious. They are seen as people who purposefully run away from tasks. This stereotype is absolutely dismantled in this book by the main character. Zoe is so busy with all that she has to do for her family that she actually does not even have time for herself. Her responsibilities are that of a grown adult, and I would even argue that even some adults would not be able to carry out the duties Zoe has to do every day, being a 7th grader and all. So the book states, I'm going to give you guys a quick quote. You can find it on page 52. I reposition Hector to be inside my jacket, zip it partly around him, and sit down next to Aurora and Bryce. I wrap the 2 of them up as best I can and give them kisses and kisses and more kisses. Some people can do their homework. Some people get to have crushes on boys. Some people have other things they've got to do. So Zoe is a 7th grader, but is unable to even participate in her education the way she wishes to. It's not that she doesn't want to. Because her mom works to try and support the family, and because Zoe's father is not in the picture, the responsibility of taking care of the younger children falls on her. She is therefore barred from other experiences. Not only does her circumstance deprive her of a steady life, it deprives her of opportunities to participate in homework. She states herself that she just has other things to do. Furthermore, the idea that teenagers are governed by hormones and sexual drive is absolutely crushed in this book. Throughout the book, Zoe describes a fascination with a boy named Matt. She watches him in class and he gets onto her bus, but Zoe understands that it is not a crush, but something completely different. She writes, "Because suddenly I know this isn't some crush on a boy. This is me wanting to feel the way he does. Strong, confident, like no one would even think about messing with me." And that can be found on page 68. So throughout the novel, Zoe is trying to figure out her feelings towards Matt. Her friend teases her that it's a crush, but Zoe reassures her that it is not a crush because she does not have interest in boys. She doesn't have time for that or energy to think of the boys due to all her responsibilities. Instead, she realizes that her emotion towards him are that of envy. She wishes she could have a life free of worries, that she can have a steady mother to be there for her rather than she be there for her mother. She wishes she can carry herself with confidence, knowing that her clothes are clean and her hair is not mangled. Zoe falls out of the stereotypical experience of adolescence of having hormonal urges. She is too preoccupied with being an adult, with adult business. Teenagers are also represented as being driven by emotions and peer pressure. Their mood swings are responsible for their actions and not their life circumstances responsible for their mood. Zoe's best friend, Fuchsia, is characterized by her hyper attitude and unique sense of self, but it is also Fuchsia who is seen crying a lot in the book, but not because of hormones, but rather because of life circumstances. The next quote is found on page 189, and it says, "I've even memorized the DCF's person's phone number. I just have to be brave enough to call it." She opens her eyes and lies up at the ceiling. But I'm not. I stare at her eyeliner-streaked face and her swollen eyes. Why should anyone have to be that brave? Zoe is not alone in life struggles. Her best friend Fuchsia experiences the effects of what desperation can do to someone in need of finances. Fuchsia's mother, just as like Zoe's, puts up with a very abusive significant other for financial stability. The man is so abusive to the point that he threatens Fuchsia with a gun. In this scene, Zoe tries to comfort her friend. It is often said that teens are emotional, that they are driven by feelings. They lash out in fits of rage or tears. Here, Fuchsia proves to us that crying is for everyone. Crying does not need an age or affiliation with a group. She cries as she experiences the scariest moment in her life, something a young person like her should really not be experiencing. Her situation, rather than hormones, propel her into tears. She knows she needs to stand up for herself and be brave, but why is it that anyone has to be brave the way that she has to be? It is heartbreaking for even Zoe. And another point that I would like to point out is that teens are oftentimes called immature, unable to understand adult topics. Zoe breaks the stereotype. She's all too well acquainted with mature content. One night, when she has put her siblings to bed, she sneaks off towards her mom's bedroom. There, she overhears her mom's boyfriend's Lenny verbally abusing her mom. In that moment, Zoe realizes where her confident, strong mother disappeared to. She was stifled by Lenny. In the moment, Zoe makes the decision to be strong and to never let anyone mess with her. She says, "Because this is my moment when everything is suddenly clear, I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm not going to let anybody mess with me." And that's found on page 108. So in conclusion, Zoe's experience of adolescence is not the same as compared to her classmates. Because of her class, Zoe is responsible for taking care of her siblings, which leaves her with no time for herself or even good schoolwork. She's unable to go out with her friends to have fun. Her family does not have enough money to even afford yogurt whenever they wish to have it. She is too busy for crushes, and her life too demanding for her to be rebellious or moody. The benefits of being an octopus showcases that adolescence is a class construct, that it was designed for a particular group of people, and since it was designed rather than inherently true, we can conclude from this book that adolescence is indeed a social construct. In the next segment, I invite one of my best friends to talk about our experience with adolescence. Very good point. You make good points.
Growing up sucked.
Why do you say that?
Because once I finally gained the freedom to leave the house, my parents semi-trusted me. I realized that you couldn't go anywhere without a car, and I was too young to get a car, and I was too young to get a job. And when I reached the age where I was able to get a job and able to get a car, I sucked with money so badly that it took me years to get one. So now I can explore the world the way I want to. And that didn't come with like restrictions. You know, when I got my first job, my parents were always on top of me returning home. But when I was having my days off, my phone never rang and nobody ever really checked up on me. But it was kind of nice to have that ease off my back, I guess, where I don't have someone looking over my shoulder all the time.
Were people in your high school, did they have cars?
Yeah.
So you were kind of like the one left out?
Not necessarily, because the ones that had cars they were like the all-star athlete kids, and these were the preppy kids from like out of town that they live so far away they get special transportation to the school. My friends, since we all kind of grew up in the same setting, it was a matter of we don't have a car because, well, we just can't afford it yet. But it was cool because, I mean, we're not spending money on gas right now.
Yeah.
We're just getting the free ride from the school bus. Can't really complain with that, but there was a time though where I had a friend that did have his own car, and I quickly learned how responsible you truly have to be on the road because of how many times we've gotten pulled over together.
With that friend?
Yeah, with that friend.
Oh boy.
I don't.
Who?
This was an old friend. His name was Julio or something. So
You don't even remember his name?
It was like a friend for a month, and the guy disappeared. He never came back to school. So.
Dang.
Yeah. Yeah, one of those people you just meet, they come and go. But how about for you? Was it strict for you growing up through the trenches?
Are you kidding me? Listen, I can't even begin. I don't know where to begin with how strict it used to be. But no, my experience of adolescence, it really tied into my cultural, not even my culture, because I don't think all Russians are the way that my family is, but my family was very conservative, very religious to the point, especially recently, more recent, but religious to the point of like, all right, this really seems like a conspiracy theory here. And after having like left the faith, I realized how dangerous a lot of the ideas that surrounded religion in my household were. Like, for example, I viewed myself as like being set apart from everyone else, so I didn't participate in a lot of things. I didn't participate in like parties. I never went to a party. I've never like did drugs or alcohol until much later than what is stereotypical for, you know, when you first try. I obviously didn't have sex in high school. Like, that's like a huge no-no. Like, you can't. Deemed for hell. And like I guess there's just this idea that I don't necessarily think I thought I was better than everyone, but maybe subconsciously I was kind of like, how can you live that way? Like, how can like how can you live that way? So I guess my experience in Christianity really barred me from a lot of the stereotypical things that adolescents usually experience.
That's kind of sad. I had the complete opposite, I'd say. There was the freedom to worship whomever and whatever, as long as it was logically okay, I guess, or morally okay, there was a huge presence of worshiping God in the households, in my mom's household when I grew up. But none of it was ever forced. If I wanted to have sex before getting married, I can. If I wanted to stay out late, way past reasonable hours, I'm talking 4, 5, 6 in the morning, I can. If I want to go somewhere like across the country and make sure I can make it back, I can. There was never any sort of, oh, you have to walk and talk this way and read this and attend church on Sundays, and none of that. And I don't think I was ever going to tolerate it because it was cult-like behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, I can never understand worshiping something, especially through my early years where I'm still developing and I'm still trying to understand the world. You mean to tell me that it's a mandatory thing and that I worship somebody I never met in life? Telling somebody that when they're just starting to understand things is kind of weird. It's alienating.
Yeah, but you see, my experience with religion, it started from birth, basically. And, like, that's why it was so easy to continue believing. That it wasn't just belief, it was literally reality. Like, my belief in God was more real than, like, this world. Like, it was so tangible. Like, I spent, instead of, like, participating in sports, like, I didn't participate in sports. I did try to participate in sports in freshman year of high school, but because I had to take care of my siblings, which is something I feel like was put on me because I'm a woman, I'm a girl, and but that's a whole different thing. We'll talk about that later. But because I had that, I was taking care of my siblings. It was school, homework, and church. Like, I was in church like 5 days a week.
A constant routine.
5 days a week, yeah.
Wow, that's a robotic kind of pattern.
Yeah.
That's pretty robotic. That's dehumanizing. I wouldn't even wish that kind of routine on my worst enemy. You mean to tell me as a child, growing up, especially through high school, you were restricted from even thinking that I have to miss out on high school activities that I'll never get the chance to experience again because of some inconvenience that has truly nothing to do with me, but I was brought into it under and against my own, like, will. That right there that's scary. That's a scary way to grow up. That's not something that I could really.
Yeah. And actually, a lot of my mental health issues stemmed from that as well. But because, you know how, like, the stereotype is teenagers are really moody and they are hormones. That was put on me by my parents. It's like, there was a specific moment in my life that I remember me and my stepdad were, like, beefing. And we weren't talking for some reason. And during that time, like, I remember just, like, the randomest things being imposed on me, like, oh, you're so mature, you're so, like, how you're so hormonal, you're so moody, and, like, but I was just facing the fact that I grew up without a father, and now the only father figure in my life wasn't even talking to me. Of course I was going to be upset. Of course I'm going to be moody. Of course it wasn't even moody. It wasn't hormones. It was, hey, like, this is trauma.
Yeah, this is traumatizing.
Yeah.
You as the adult, there has to be a certain level of forgiveness and patience that you have with a child, no matter whose child it is. There's just an unspoken amount of patience you're supposed to have. You're not allowed to have your adult reactions and emotions and responses and take that and interact with a child. Because a child is not going to understand those actions. A child's not going to understand that mood and language that you show to them. I can't go to my nieces and talk to them the way I speak to another adult. They're going to be confused. I understand that I need to talk to them in a certain way to where they will understand what I'm talking to them about. Whether it's something of that they're being reprimanded of, or something needs to be corrected. You speak to them in a way where they understand the message, but it's not going to stick to their heads to where they're going to overthink about it at night. They're going to cry themselves to sleep about it. They're going to feel like they disappointed you. And growing up, I had a lot of that happen, especially from my father, even to this day.
Did you feel that your father thought of you in that way, that you were just hormonal, or like you're moody?
Absolutely. My father does not like the fact that I'm sensitive to certain things. He actually doesn't. He does not like the fact that I'm more in touch with my feelings and that I'm more in touch with my emotions. He doesn't like the fact that I take time to sit there and analyze everything before I actually interact or make an action to do something. But that also falls on part of him because he didn't take the time in his personal life to understand that side of him. So when he sees me doing it, it looks different and weird to him. So he reacts the way he reacts because he knows no better. And he refuses to change or grow to understand different and better. But that's on him. That's not on me. That's something that I experienced, and unfortunately I had to suffer through it in my earlier years, my teenage years especially. From, like, I'd say it started from 13 to when I hit 19. But I'm in my 20s. I really do not care at all. Yeah. That is
at this point, it's like, listen,
the damage is done, buddy. The damage is done.
No.
I'll just go to I'll go to a bar, get me a double, and I'll call it a night. No. Exactly. But that stuff, it really matters because you carry that with you through your adult years.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit here and cry about it every single day, but it impacts me because, like, when I graduated and I walked the stage and I got my diploma, it didn't feel like an embracing of my parents, like, oh my God, congratulations. It was more of a, oh, finally we don't have to worry about this again moment. So it was like, wow, okay, well, got this chore done. What's the next chore I gotta do? Get another job. What's the next chore I gotta do? Find a place or go to college or enlist. What's the next chore? So that's how it's always felt to me.
Knowing you, so, okay, the way I see you, you're very unique, and I feel like you think very differently.
Thank you.
Than a lot of people that I've met. And I wonder how that used to be like when you were a teen. Like, did you feel as though you kind of didn't fit in?
No, I knew I didn't fit in.
Uh-huh.
I woke up every day knowing I didn't fit in. And there were days where I would try to fit in, and there were weeks where all I would care about is fitting in. Like, I would stress about getting different kind of clothes to my parents, trying to get them to buy me more expensive sneakers, trying to get different haircuts, and I thought that was a way for me to get more friends and be accepted. And now that I'm an adult and I've learned that stuff doesn't matter. That stuff that's hogwash. It's garbage.
Yeah.
You don't want any of that. That's bad for you. The same way how people say soda is bad for you, candy's bad for you, trying to fit in is terrible. You might as well open up a pack of cigarettes and smoke them all one by one. It's bad for you. But I believe that a huge portion of teenage trauma, if not all of it, but a very huge chunk of it, comes at the blame of our elders not warning us about it. And also our elders contributing to it.
Oh, yeah.
Because they contribute to it without even telling us.
Yeah.
And then they just want to tell us, oh, get over it.
Yeah.
Oh, like, you'll be fine. That stuff doesn't exist.
My experience with mental health in my family, again, going back to the religious aspect, mental health did not exist. If you were mentally unstable in any way, like if you were feeling depressed or sad, or like you had a bad day, stress, anxiety, all that stuff, that was Satan. That was demonic possession. That was like, you're not close to God. And knowing that, hey, I'm actually struggling with this right now, it brought so much extra guilt. Like, it brought so much shame. Like, I'm a Christian, I'm not supposed to be feeling this way. But because I knew that I felt those things, I'm like, listen, I know that this is real. This is real for me. But the other thing growing up was being a girl, and how that shaped the way that I was brought up as opposed to my brothers. So my brother, he did sports. Dan, he did sports. He did like a bunch of stuff, and I didn't do sports. I tried joining the soccer team freshman year, and I did it for like 2 weeks. And at that moment in my life, I was obsessed. Absolutely obsessed with soccer. But 2 weeks into it, my mom was like, hey, can you quit so you can help me take care of the children. Yeah, my sister was born when I was in 4th grade, and then my little brother was born 4 years later when I was in 6th grade. So I had 2 small siblings, and my mom did not work, but my stepdad worked. And I do not really know why, looking back at it, she needed so much help. Like, I understand 2 little kids, that's a lot of work. But it came at the expense of me enjoying things like sports and...
missing out on possible futures.
Yeah.
You could have been in college with a scholarship playing college level soccer by now.
Yeah.
You could have been a professional baseball player. You could have been playing basketball, swimming, swim team, anything. And what sucks is those paths that you could have taken will no longer exist because of somebody else being selfish.
Yeah, and being a girl and being a teenager, like, that's especially, you know, like, girls especially are considered to be very emotional. And so, growing up, a lot of the things that I've experienced were, like, disregarded, because it's like, oh, you're just growing up, it's a phase, you know, this will pass, whatever. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I missed out on sports, I missed out on clubs. What else? I remember this one particular moment in my life where my parents left somewhere and I didn't wash the dishes. Yo, the moment they came back, it was like storm upon me. How could you leave these dishes?
How unchristian.
How could you leave these dishes? When you get married, your husband will return you to us because you are so ill-prepared to serve him. These were actual words that were said to me, and I was there like, this is wrong.
Brainwash.
This is so wrong.
Brainwash.
I'm like, what? They were literally yelling at me for not washing the dishes, and I'm like, confused screaming. A lot of the things that I feel like are imposed on teenagers are very, like, contradictory. Like, a lot of what my mom and, like, what other adults would tell me is like, you're so grown, like, you're supposed to be able to know how to do this, and this, but then in other aspects they're like, you're too young for this, you don't understand. Mm-hmm. It's like, which one?
Yeah, like, who are you to tell me when I'm too old and too young? Granted, I understand if I'm a minor. When I'm still a minor, yes, I am way too young to understand. And maybe even 18, 19, and 20. But 21 and up, no, I know a couple things about life. Especially when I hate, and I can't stand when people say, oh, all teenagers do is play video games and go outside with their friends. That's what 20-year-olds do. That's what 30-year-olds do. That's what 40-year-olds do.
Exactly.
That's what 50-year-olds do.
Exactly.
That's what 60-year-olds do.
Yeah.
Do you not understand that these things you blame teenagers for, like, oh, you rotten kids, all you do is stay up at night and cause ruckus? What do you think construction workers do? What do you think billionaires do on a day-to-day basis? What do you think? You have to really dive deep and understand somebody's level of education, because if you talk to an adult who doesn't understand that there's an industry, a $1 billion industry that relates to video games, and that there are people actively making lifestyles and being successful in this industry, if you don't explain that to them, they will forever blame and make fun of teenagers for playing video games. Oh, that's all you do as a kid. What if this kid becomes successful? What if they're gifted at that? Mm-hmm. But you made fun of him instead.
Yeah.
Now he may doubt himself playing video games. Maybe he'll even walk away from it. You just ruined something that an innocent child was enjoying. Because what? You're a depressed, miserable old person. You just took somebody's passion and ripped it apart. Did you find any enjoyment in that?
The other thing that I kind of want to talk about is, so there's ideas that, for example, class, what are you doing?
Sorry, I had to stretch.
Like, not class as in, like, classroom, but class as in, like, your social status. It impacts the way that you grow up. So, example, if you're in poverty, you're more likely to have more responsibilities. that bar you from participating in school, from participating in going to parties, participating from, whatever. But also race. I mentioned how for me it was gender and my religion that shaped my adolescence and made it very difficult for me to be a teen. But then again, like being a teen, like what does that entail? It entails very bad stereotypes. But have you experienced anything like that where it was, you felt like because you didn't have enough money, or because maybe of your race or your ethnicity, that you were unable to kind of experience adolescence?
Yes. There were so many times that I was made fun of by people I thought were my friends because I had to miss out on certain, I guess, adult-like activities due to me not having the funds to, or me just not relating to such religious activities and things like that. There were times like certain college parties that my friends got invited to even before we were even going to college, but because I was a Puerto Rican and it was a college party for like Dominican kids, I had to be excluded, and it happened to me in my face. And in a way it kind of humbled me because I understood that I'm not the one to sell myself short for a little bit of acceptance to go to a party that I really don't care about.
Yeah.
Just to fit in with people I don't know.
Yeah, people
Like there wasn't. There were times and actually this still happens today where groups of friends that I have would go to watch movies together, and they would assume that I wouldn't go or I can't go because I don't have money to go or I don't have a way to get there. But then, you just kind of rub it back in their face in a humble way when they talk about, oh, I wish I didn't live in this state anymore, or I wish I had the brand new blah blah blah, and then you just subtly show that, oh, what you're feeling and dreaming and drooling over, I've been accomplished, and the feeling honestly was mediocre. Like what you think is so grand and so amazing is truly nothing. It's truly just a moment, a breath of air, and that's it. The heart keeps beating. And back when we were younger, that mattered so much. That either made who you were or it broke you as a person, as a kid.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, all these people got the new Roshis and all these people got new tech sweaters from Nike, and I'm still wearing the same Old Navy clothes. Like, and as kids, like this stuff mattered. Oh my God, it mattered. It was like social reputation, and seeing people that are so stuck to it now in adulthood is so scary because it shows that never left them. That part of school and growing up, and that part never left them. They still believe in social hierarchy.
What's it like for you growing up as the middle child? Because I'm the youngest in mine. And you have 2 brothers?
2 older, and then I have 2 younger siblings.
2 older siblings and 2 younger siblings.
Yes.
What's it like having the weight and the pressure of raising your 2 younger siblings while actively raising yourself?
Listen. Yeah, I mean, culturally speaking, again, it's so different the way women are regarded in my culture and the religion that I grew up in. And so it was more of an expectation. It was more of like, yeah, you have to do this. You have to raise them, rather than like, oh, like, it's crazy because they're my siblings. But a lot of the times I felt like they were my kids. And that's how other people would call them. They're like, oh, you have to babysit? Oh, your kids. And being the middle child, it's like so isolating because I couldn't really relate to my older siblings because, they're out doing their thing. I can't relate to my younger siblings. So you're a self-sufficient machine. You gain independence. I gained a lot of independence as being a middle child because I had to navigate raising myself and raising my younger siblings. But also having to not talk about my emotions, not talk about doubts about religion, not having to do all of these things. And so I became super independent. That's why when like I go to reach at the top shelf, I'm not gonna ask you. I'm gonna struggle and I'm gonna reach myself.
I don't see why you still do that.
It's just habit.
You have a giant standing next to you.
A habit.
I can reach the highest apples on the tallest trees in the forest, and you still grab a ladder and climb yourself.
Yeah. That's why I'm more of an introvert too. The way that I interact with other people, I'm more independent. Like it's weird because I really love being around people and I find people fascinating. And I think I gain a lot of energy from being around people, but at the same time, I absolutely need independent time.
Mm-hmm.
Time to myself.
How is it being an immigrante?
Immigrant?
Yeah. How is it coming from Siberia, living there for 8 years, and migrating over to the United States?
Well, when I first moved, it was a culture shock. Like, everything was so different. I remember sitting in first grade, and everybody, like, was just sitting willy-nilly. In Russia, we have to sit, like, proper with our hands on the desk. But also just, like, learning the language was difficult. And growing up afterwards, wanting to have diverse friends, you know. I actually had a very diverse friend group.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was friends with Asians and people from Africa and Muslim and like gay, and I had like a very, very diverse group of friends, but I was never friends with like the popular kids in school. And I feel like popularity, so a lot of the popular kids in my school were like the upper middle class white kids, upper middle class like athletes. A lot of the times they were athletes. So, I mean, I've interacted with them and it was always respectful, but it was never to the point where I bonded with them. And it's interesting because for a very long time, I feel like I really wanted to be friends with those kids. And I felt like I was missing out, or like not. It felt like an experience I wasn't getting because of being an immigrant, because not being able to like connect to them on that level. And that's why I had like a bunch of like Russian friends too. But looking back at it, it's like I guess what did I miss out on? Not much. I'm like going to a party. Like, I don't like those. I don't like parties.
Yeah. What did you truly miss out on? I believe I had this very strong sense that I was probably friends with a lot of diverse other mini groups of friends, because they all looked at me as the guy that was like desperate for friends. So they were like, let's just be nice to him. Yeah. And I was cool with the popular kids, and they would invite me to places I knew I was not going to, or I knew that I couldn't afford. And they always, oh, Tim, why didn't you show up? Oh, no. But I would give them some little excuse, and the way they would react or their tone, it would always fly by my head. I would never think about it. Because I'm never thinking somebody would be like that towards me. Come to find out, they are. And it's like, wow, well, fast forward through life, look at where your life is and look at where mine is.
Yeah. I guess what I do want to say in the end is that it is very important to reflect on your experience of growing up.
It's very important.
It's very important.
It'll shape you into who you will become later in life in the future. Thanks for having me over, by the way.
Thank you so much for joining me.
The tea was good.
Oh yeah, the tea was great.
I would definitely like to have one more mug though before I depart.
Of course.
But yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tim Roche.
No problem, Diana Tartanovskaya.
Very nice. Beautifully said.
Well, as you say in your culture, das vidanya.
Oh,